We shall start. Thank you very much for coming bright and early to our Archaeogaming session. A couple of things in terms of like the order of business. My name is Aris Politopoulos, and I'm organizing the session together with Sebastian Heidemer, who's right over there, and he's going to be presenting after me, and with Csilla Ariese, who couldn't be here today, but Florence will also be helping us with moderating the session. So Florence over there, and they will be moderating the third part of the session. So we have a full day, tons of presentations, a lot of great stuff. It's amazing that we had so much participation. We're very grateful. We had, I think, upwards of 18, 20 papers, so it was also a very hard selection to fill in the day. We've tried to bundle up all the talks with content in mind, so there will be some follow-up presentations that are pretty similar. And for the speakers, as you can see, I have set up a little bootleg camera over there to record some of the presentations. If you don't mind your presentation being recorded, I have a consent form for GDPR purposes that you can sign. And if you wish to not be recorded, then you can let us know, and of course we're not going to do that. So, without further ado, I will start with my lecture on 10 years of Archaeogaming, and I'm going to treat this both as an argument, the stuff that we want to talk about, but also a bit of an introduction to this session as well. When I say we, in this particular case, is the Value Foundation. The Value Foundation is a Dutch NGO, a Dutch stichting that deals with video games and the past in general. It consists of various archaeologists, historians, linguists, both academic and non-academic, and we've been doing stuff at the intersection of video games and the past for the last, now I think, 8 years, 7 years, something like that, with a lot of projects. And we've been part of this field of Archaeogaming for a long time, and we thought it was a momentous opportunity to talk about these 10 or so years of Archaeogaming in this particular session, where we're also celebrating 10 years of CAA. This presentation is by myself, my colleague Angus Mol, and Csilla Ariese. Florence is also a member of the Value Foundation. There are plenty more people who are part of the Value Foundation. So, as I said, today we are actually celebrating 10 years of fun, and I think this is something that is very important to understand and to appreciate when it comes to the broader field that we call Archaeogaming, is that it's a place where a lot of us, at least I speak for myself and my colleagues, but knowing some of you, I'm sure this holds for you as well, we have been able to find the fun, really, in Archaeogaming. And by that I mean find something that we enjoy, something that we really appreciate, and at the same time something we're very passionate about, both academically and in our daily lives. I think in a month or so, myself and Angus will have a paper in the Archaeological Dialogues titled Finding the Fun, where we also make the argument of how Archaeogaming, by foregrounding and centralizing the concept of fun and enjoyment, has been able to become a successful part of our discipline. But now we are here in the 50 years of CAA, celebrating also 10 plus years of Archaeogaming. That this wasn't, of course, always the case. Archaeogaming started as a grassroots initiative, something that was mainly a passion of young career researchers, of PhDs, master students, postdocs, various places in the world and with various backgrounds. But it mainly started in the blog sphere and in the Twitter sphere. For those of you who were following, stuff like the Archaeogaming blogs of the namesake blog by Andrew Reinhardt, stuff like Gingery Gamer by Megan Dennis and Electric Archaeology by Sean Graham, Gaming Archeo by Cara Copplestone, Florence's blog, Play the Past, Sean Graham, and a lot of other people. Our own blog as Swaji with interactive pasts. And of course a lot of creative forces like the Unconference and a lot of unconventional methods in trying to get us together and talk about the stuff that we like, which were video games and archaeology, really. And it came from a place of fun, once again. It came from the fact that a lot of these people just enjoyed playing games, really. And then they figured out that it was actually possible to do stuff with this thing that they really enjoy, and academia. So much so that at some point, Andrew and Sean decided to talk about what can Archaeogaming do, and I understand that I chose the wrong file for this, so it's not the most visible one. But what Andrew and Sean did is they thought, okay, there are so many things that we can do by combining video games and archaeology. There are actually tens of things that we can do, if not hundreds of things, from research in actual archaeology, we can do philosophy, we can do reception studies, we can do outreach, we can do material culture. They went quite big with this, ranging from hardcore philosophy to quantum theory. It was a lot. Actually, it was a lot. But this was the creative force that was behind Archaeogaming, not only from Sean and Andrew, but from all the people who were participating at the time, in like 2012, 13, 14, in this emerging field of Archaeogaming. Now, this list is really big, so it kind of begs the question that have we really done all of this stuff? And if so, have we done them successfully? And this is one of the questions I want to be asking and one of the provocations I want to bring forward. In a way, this is how things are going right now, in a nutshell, right? This is not all the initiatives that deal with video games in the past, but it's a selection of them. And what it feels like in many ways is we are asking if we have made it to the academy, into academia. And I would say, by virtue of just being here and having this session, and a successful session as well, we sort of have, but out of this very long list of stuff, how many things have we really done? So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to go through some of the things that we have done, a bit critically. This presentation, we called it Good Hits and Bad Misses, because what we want to do is, we want to assess the stuff that Archaeogaming has done successfully so far, primarily the things that it has failed to do, and have an outlook for how can we improve for the next 10 years of Archaeogaming. And to do this, we are primarily interested in being self-critical. We don't really necessarily like just bashing other people's work. So we're going to highlight some of the pitfalls and successes, primarily of ourselves, but also of others, just to give a more complete picture. Not so much to be critical of other people's work, but to understand where sometimes success lies or where failure lies, and what is it that we can learn from such failure. So we have three main pillars for this. The first one is the archaeological study of games. This was one of the biggest promises of Archaeogaming, that we can use archaeology to study games, and we can use games to study archaeology, and that the methodological toolset of archaeology is useful for what we're doing with video games. The methodological toolset of that video games give us are useful for studying archaeology. So back in 2014, I had come up with an idea. I called it archaeology back then, and it was basically understanding material culture of fantasy races in fantasy games, in this case, the game of World of Warcraft, and really talk about the connections that developers make in terms of developing cultures and races in fantasy settings, what kind of stereotypes that they are using, and how can we read into that archaeological and historical narratives about said cultures. In the case of orcs, It's a nomadic tribe, they have connected with wolves, with a bit more savagery. There are all sorts of problems when it comes to the orcs. It also mirrors in the design of their cities that has this camp-like style, even though it's one of the biggest cities in World of Warcraft. It mirrors the camps of the nomadic tribe that was the orcs. And of course, as orcs became bigger and bigger and more important in World of Warcraft lore, their city became more important. This was an idea I had specifically about studying the city of Orgrimmar, because at the time I was doing a PhD on Assyrian capital cities, so I just really liked capital cities in general. I wanted to do space index of these virtual cities, see player patterns and how they relate to certain monuments, how they relate to the culture that is presented around them, and so on. Now, almost 10 years later, I can safely say that I have done absolutely nothing with this. Not only because I didn't want to, I really want to, but also because it turns out it's very hard to get such data from a company like Blizzard, for example, right? And that presents with one of the barriers that we have as people who want to study games archaeologically, is how do we get access to data like this. A little bit earlier, about a year earlier, Angus was working with networks for his own PhD, and he was also playing games. And in this particular case, he has the example of DayZ. He had made the argument that online games can be seen as Hobbesian states of nature, really with no social contract present, but contrary to what Hobbes had argued, Angus says that in games, such a social contract is not particularly needed because cooperation and forms of cooperation tend to be inherent in certain forms of play. And he studied DayZ, but he also studied a number of other games through network theory to see the kind of cooperation models that players develop really from the ground up. And he really viewed online games as a testing ground for archaeological social theory. Now, this is something that some people have picked up, not necessarily from Angus, but independently, and have done stuff like Sean Graham with agent-based modeling. But this idea of using video games as testing grounds for social theory still remains very much a call to action and hasn't really been realized that much. One thing that has been realized is the No Man's Sky Archaeological Survey, which was organized initially by Andy Reinhardt. No Man's Sky, a video game that is a procedurally generated galaxy, basically a giant galaxy that you can travel throughout and encounter myriads of planets. And as it happens, some of these planets have ruins, procedurally generated ruins. And Andrew thought that this would be a great testing ground for doing an archaeological survey in a video game. And also, how do we document procedurally generated culture? Is there any worth in doing that as well? Now, I will quote him. This is not my assessment necessarily, that the project didn't really have the expected results. He has seen some successes, but he has seen quite a number of failures in that particular project as well. Some of them were connected to the state of the game when it was released. Some of them were connected to the fact that certain archaeological survey methodologies cannot be directly applied to a game, because this was Andrew's initial goal, to showcase how we can use strictly archaeological methodologies in a game. In the end, he and also the entire crew that participated in it, because it was an open call and players could participate and document as well. It wasn't something that he was doing by himself. It produced great results, great material. All of it is open and available, which speaks to the robustness and passion of Andrew to do this project. But in terms of the total output, we can only call it marginally successful at best. And it's something that has been done only in this particular game. It's very hard to be reproduced, and even in this case, it still lacks some of the oomph, let's say. The other pillar that I think is central, and a lot of people have actually said that this is the thing that we have going for us, is archaeological outreach. We're using games, again, a hugely successful medium, so the best thing that we can do as archaeogamers is outreach. Now, that's a question, I think, it's not a statement necessarily. Is this the thing that we're best suited for, to do archaeological outreach by using games? And if so, why have we not really done it? Because the reality of the situation is that not that many archaeological outreach projects from academics come from the combination of games and archaeology. We ourselves have a successful story to tell and a failed story to share. The successful story that we have is a project we called Minecraft. It ran for 2 years, hopefully we can pick it up in the post-pandemic world, which basically was a playful approach to reconstructing local heritage. We went around various places in the Netherlands to reconstruct local Roman heritage. And we did this across the Netherlands. We had over 2,000-3,000 participants in total. We had over 500 people building with us these one-to-one reconstructions of Roman heritage in the Netherlands. This is an example of doing one of the Minecraft events at the National Museum of Antiquities. And we also expanded beyond Minecraft because it was seen as something that was quite successful. So we did stuff with the Nineveh exhibition at the RMO, we went to Belgium, we went to Wales to do this project internationally as well. So this is something that, at least for us, it's a bit of a success story, but still we're looking into 3,000-4,000 participants in total over the span of 2 years, which in terms of impact, it can also be seen as not that much. Another thing we love to be doing is streaming. We stream a lot, we stream every week, and we offer archaeological and historical commentary of games. We've been doing this for the past 5-6 years, and I can also assure you that we have the great average viewership of 7 people in a platform that to be successful you need to have 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 viewers at a given stream. And despite the consistency and the persistence that we had for this, we even got a science communication grant of 50,000 euros at some point to do a streaming the past project. We hired archaeology and history students, and they were streaming. And so we were putting out streams every day for a full year with a lot of daily content, if I may say so myself. Even that, our peak success was about 25 to 30 concurrent viewers at a given time, and that was the biggest success that we had. So to sort of close off, because I'm taking advantage of my own time here, the last thing that Archeogaming promised was to build bridges between us as academics, players, and developers. And the current reality of the situation is both of these, players and developers on one hand, and academics on the other side, really still not talking too much to each other. But even within the field, we also don't talk to each other. In fact, we are here at the CAA, and inherently interdisciplinary conference, right? And it's great to see how many people want to participate in a session like this. But there are a lot of people who are not here. We don't have developers here. We don't have historians here. And in fact, historians have moved and done their own thing with the Historical Games Network and History and Games Lab and the Spiel in Germany. So not only we are not talking to developers, let alone the big developers like Ubisoft and Firaxis and Santa Monica, right? We're also not really talking to historians. So we haven't really been successful in building these bridges. And we haven't really been successful in the end, I think, on impact. So that begs the question of whether archaeogaming is in some form of crisis. Because in terms of game design, we have very many successful historical games and archaeological games, from indie developers to major game developers. We have done, from the past until today, we have done some successful sessions, but as Horn put it in his review of the Archaeogaming book, he felt that Archaeogaming is still what we would call in game terminology early access. Something that has a lot of great potential, but not really there yet. And in terms of the public, again, we're going to bring our own example of even the most successful YouTube videos that we put out there barely make it to 1,000 views, but on average we're talking about 20 views, maybe 10 views of our streams that we spend hours both making and preparing as well. So just to close this off and to not take advantage of our time as well, I think we really need to be upgrading our gear a bit. I would argue that we do have the tools for research and outreach. Some of these I have shown you, and a lot of these will be shown today by all of the lectures. But we do need to figure out how to make them work a little, because some of them just don't work the way we want them. We might no longer be seen as a niche discipline. Archaeogaming papers have been published in many places. We are still here, even though the last CAA Archeogaming session was in 2019. We were able to do one more here, so that speaks to the longevity, that it's often still seen as a gimmick from universities to sort of be a catch for new students. So like, hey, we do games, come study with us. But sessions like this do make us optimistic. And we may have some shaky bridges, and some of you have good connections and established connections. But as a discipline, I would say we need more interdisciplinary playgrounds to come together and really play and work together. Something like that is what we're going to be doing at the Interactive Past Conference in 2 months, or a month and a half, I should say, at Leiden, at the Faculty of Archaeology, 24th, 26th of May. Registrations will open soon. Call for papers has closed for some time, but it will be lovely to see you there, because there we will have also the historians and the game developers and the archaeologists, hopefully, as well. Thank you very much. I hope we're going to have a great session. I'm sure it's going to be a great session. It's great to see you all here. Yeah, and see you around. Thank you.